The red ink bled across my business plan like an open wound. Unrealistic fantasy, sprawled across the executive summary in Professor William Hartley's unmistakable handwriting. I sat in the back row of his entrepreneurship class, watching him hand back our final projects with the theatrical flair of an executioner. Each student received their verdict with either relief or devastation. Mine came with a special performance. "Ms. Torres," he announced, holding my proposal high enough for everyone to see the F circled in red. "Class, this is what happens when ambition exceeds ability." 30 pairs of eyes turned to watch my humiliation. I kept my face neutral, a skill I'd perfected in boardrooms he didn't know I frequented. A technology incubator with integrated education programs? He flipped through pages, each covered in red corrections. Venture capital funding in the millions? International expansion within 5 years. His laugh was dry, academic, cruel. "This isn't a business plan, it's a fiction novel." "The market research supports," I began. "The market research is irrelevant when the fundamental premise is flawed," he interrupted. "You've clearly spent too much time reading TechCrunch and not enough time understanding actual business fundamentals." Jessica, his favorite student, smirked from the front row. She'd submitted a plan for a food truck, safe, small, exactly what Hartley wanted to see. "Successful entrepreneurs start small," he continued, using my plan as a prop for his lecture. "They don't fantasize about changing the world from their dorm rooms. They understand limitations, work within realistic parameters." I thought about the email on my phone from the Singapore Economic Board, confirming my company's expansion into Southeast Asia, 2 years ahead of the timeline that Hartley called fantasy. Furthermore, he adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, the ones he'd worn since the 90s along with his outdated theories. "The financial projections here are laughable. No student startup achieves these numbers. It's mathematically impossible. Mathematically impossible. I'd cleared those numbers 6 months ago." "Sir," I said quietly, "several successful companies started with ambitious visions. Started by people with experience, capital, and connections," he cut me off. "Not by undergraduate students with delusions of grandeur. This plan shows a fundamental misunderstanding of business reality." He dropped my proposal on his desk with theatrical disdain. "I've been teaching for 25 years, Ms. Torres. I know the difference between vision and delusion. This," he gestured at my work, "is the latter." The class tittered nervously, grateful they weren't the ones being dissected. "For your own good," he concluded, "I suggest you consider a more traditional career path. Perhaps an entry-level position where you can learn how business actually works." I gathered my failed proposal, each page a testament to what he couldn't see. "Thank you for your feedback, Professor." "Don't thank me," he replied. "Thank me when you realize I saved you from wasting years chasing impossible dreams." As I left the classroom, I heard him address the others. "Let this be a lesson. Ambition without foundation is just expensive failure waiting to happen." That evening, I sat in my real office. Not the dorm room Hartley imagined, but the top floor of a building in the city's tech district. The wall displayed logos of companies we'd funded, founded, and scaled. The fantasy business plan lay on my desk beside signed contracts worth more than Hartley would see in a lifetime. My phone buzzed. Sarah, my business partner and the CFO who'd helped build our education technology empire. "Board meeting confirmed for Thursday. The university acquisition is ready for final approval." The university acquisition. The same university where Hartley preached his gospel of thinking small. I'd started Torres Ed Tech 3 years ago with inheritance money my family didn't know I'd received. While my classmates partied and studied, I built relationships with venture capitalists who saw what Hartley couldn't. That education technology was about to explode, that the integration of learning and innovation would reshape how we taught entrepreneurship itself. The business plan Hartley failed was real. Every projection, every partnership, every expansion strategy was already in motion. I'd submitted it for his class partly to complete my degree requirements, but mostly out of curiosity. Would an entrepreneurship professor recognize actual entrepreneurship? The answer was written in red ink. Thursday's board meeting was held in our conference room overlooking the university campus. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Hartley's building, where he was probably marking down another student's dreams. "The university's financial situation is worse than public records indicate," our acquisition attorney explained. "They're desperate for funding, especially for the business school." "How poetic," Sarah murmured, knowing my history. "Our offer stands," I said. "Full funding for the new business school, endowment for entrepreneurship programs, and renovation of the current facilities. There's one condition from the university, the attorney continued. They want to announce the donation at graduation. Public ceremony, full media coverage. The donor would need to be present. Graduation, where Hartley would hood his favorite students and probably make another speech about realistic expectations. Perfect, I decided. Accept their terms. The weeks leading to graduation passed in a blur of contracts, architectural plans, and program development. I attended my final classes, including Hartley's, where he used my failed project as a recurring example of what not to do. Remember Ms. Torres's technology incubator? He'd say when discussing feasibility studies. That's what happens when Netflix documentaries replace actual business education. I took notes, not on his lecture, but on how outdated his curriculum was. Soon, that would change. Graduation day arrived with perfect spring weather. I sat with my classmates in alphabetical order, my cap and gown identical to theirs. Hartley sat on stage with other faculty, probably preparing remarks about entering the real world with realistic expectations. The ceremony proceeded with standard speeches about future potential and lifelong learning. Then, President Morrison approached the podium for what everyone assumed was another funding appeal. Before we confer degrees, she began, I have an extraordinary announcement. The university has received the largest donation in its history, specifically designated for the complete transformation of our business school. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. On stage, Hartley straightened in his chair. This gift will fund a new building, cutting-edge technology labs, and most importantly, a revolutionary curriculum focused on innovation and practical entrepreneurship. In the faculty section, several professors exchanged glances. Hartley's expression remained carefully neutral. The donor, President Morrison continued, is particularly passionate about supporting ambitious students whose visions exceed traditional boundaries. They believe, and I quote, that education should expand possibilities, not limit them. Those were my words, written in the proposal Hartley had covered in red ink. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Ms. Lucia Torres, founder and CEO of Torres EdTech, whose $50 million donation will transform how we teach business for generations to come. The silence was deafening. Then chaos. I stood as spotlights found me in the sea of graduates. Around me, classmates gasped, recognizing the name from tech news they'd apparently been reading instead of Hartley's assigned texts. On stage, I watched Hartley's glasses slip down his nose as he processed what he was hearing. Ms. Torres, would you please join us on stage? I made my way forward past Jessica, whose food truck plan suddenly seemed less impressive, past rows of students filming on their phones, up the stairs where Hartley sat frozen. President Morrison handed me the microphone. The crowd waited. 4 years ago, I began finding Hartley's eyes. I enrolled here to learn about entrepreneurship. What I learned instead was that sometimes the best education comes from being told what's impossible. Hartley's face had gone from white to red, his glasses now barely clinging to the tip of his nose. Every red mark on my business plan, every limitation pointed out, every realistic boundary set, they all served as motivation to prove that ambition and ability aren't mutually exclusive. I pulled out a familiar document. My business plan, still covered in Hartley's red ink. This unrealistic fantasy has generated $200 million in revenue, funded 47 startups, and created educational programs in 12 countries. The projections called mathematically impossible were actually conservative. In the crowd, I saw my classmates frantically Googling, their phones confirming what their professor couldn't see. The new Torres Business School, I announced, will teach students to think beyond traditional boundaries, to dream bigger than their professors might believe possible, to understand that sometimes the difference between fantasy and vision is just perspective and time. Applause erupted. On stage, the dean shook my hand enthusiastically while Hartley remained seated, his world recalibrating in real time. Professor Hartley, I said, turning to him directly, the microphone carrying my words across the stadium. Thank you for your instruction. You taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that those who can't see the future shouldn't be the ones defining it. His glasses finally gave up, falling into his lap. After the ceremony, as I signed papers making the donation official, Hartley approached. 25 years of academic authority had crumbled in 25 minutes. I don't understand, he stammered. You were just a student. The plan was impossible. No, I corrected gently. I was never just a student. And you were never just a teacher. We were both playing roles. The difference is I knew I was playing. But the numbers, the projections, were from my actual company, I explained. I submitted a real business plan for a real business. You graded reality as fantasy because it didn't fit your framework. He stared at the architectural renderings of the new building that would replace his classroom. What happens now? Now you have a choice, I said. Retire with your traditional views intact, or stay and learn what entrepreneurship really looks like in the 21st century. The new curriculum will need experienced professors, ones willing to expand their own boundaries. He picked up his fallen glasses, cleaning them slowly. You're offering me a job? After everything? I'm offering you the same thing you offered me, I replied. A chance to learn how business actually works. That fall, the Torres Business School opened with a revolutionary approach to entrepreneurship education. Former students became teachers, real startups were born in our incubators, and impossible dreams were treated as tomorrow's business plans. And Professor William Hartley? He teaches a course called Beyond Boundaries, when student visions exceed teacher perspectives. His red pen has been retired. On his desk sits a framed document, my original business plan, red marks and all. Below it, a small plaque. Fantasy is just reality that hasn't been recognized yet. Sometimes the best entrepreneurs aren't the ones who think small and safe. Sometimes they're the ones who submit their actual billion-dollar business plans as homework, knowing their professors will fail them for dreaming too big. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to fund the school that will teach future dreamers that the only truly unrealistic fantasy is limiting yourself to someone else's definition of possible.